Top of the afternoon to everyone. My name's Chip. I'm from K-State. Thanks for the introduction, Aaron. If you guys, if there's any questions, make sure you drop them into the question and answer stuff, the chat, and we'll hopefully get some feedback from y'all. And my hope is to introduce the Mesonet a little bit, talk about some of the products we have and some of the ways you can use the data, and then we'll go into the climate outlook. Today is the 7th, and note that some of these slides haven't been updated since the 7th, so some of them are outdated a little bit just because weather is always changing. And if you're in central and east Kansas, you should really appreciate it after yesterday because it changes quite rapidly. So the first, I thought I'd start with a poll, and if you can, go to pollev.com/KSU and then just hit the map. Select the map where you live or where you're at least coming from. So we get an idea of where everyone is in relation to the state of Kansas. The Kansas Mesonet is a network of weather stations. So all the green squares that you see are 30-foot towers, and all the red circles are 2 meter, we call them 2 meter, but they're really 6-foot tripods, and they collect all the same data at the various heights below 10 feet and then above 4 inches. So we collect temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, solar radiation, pressure. All those things are standardized across the network, including soil temperature and soil moisture and precipitation. And we do that at all these sites across the state. The towers just have a second set of sensors at 30 foot and then soil moisture sensors. So click where you are on that map. And then when we get to the next one, I think you can't select your answer anymore. Unfortunately, I sort of messed up as I thought it would show the results and it doesn't. So sorry about that. So like I mentioned, we have two types, the 30-foot tower and then the 6-foot tripod. And we started out as all tripods, which you see on the left there, and now we're migrating towards all towers just because it matches the inversion data we want to measure across the state, and we also want soil moisture across the state as well. It's gone through some changes over the years, but pretty much all the basic data is available. We've got data records back to the mid-'80s when we started this network at 13 experiment fields across the state. So we actually have a climate record at 13 sites, which is pretty awesome. The Kansas Mesonet is part of what we call the Weather Data Library. That's in the Department of Agronomy. And it's just one aspect of what we do. We also have the state climate office at climate.ksu.edu. But you can access all the Mesonet data at mesonet.ksu.edu. That's real time. That is the most recent 5-minute data we have available. It takes usually about a 10-minute delay just because it's got to go into the cloud and get quality controlled and various things. So there is a little bit of a delay there, but it's as up to date as you can get on any network in the state. So the next question would be, have you used the Mesonet at all? And oh, hey, it's showing a response. All right. So hopefully it's interactive now. So hopefully you all have heard of it at least. And the reason you haven't used it is I see there's a few that haven't. Hopefully this will give you some motivation to use it in the future. All our data is on the website that we can make available. We do have other data such as 1-minute data we collect, which you don't really have much use for because it's just so much data. We don't have it on the website. But if there's a wind event and you need down to the 1-minute data, we have it. So feel free to contact us, as well as precipitation 1-minute data is quickly becoming more important as you see heavier rains. That's the typical climate impact of the changing climate in the last 30 years, as you've seen longer periods between rain events, but we have actually had more intense rain events when it rains. So that 1-minute data is becoming really crucial. So all the 5-minute data is available on that front page. You can do lots of things on that front page. You can select your station, and just it'll bring up more details on the left there, or if you're on a browser, it'll bring it up on the top. You can change the map. There's 3 maps options on the front page, or basically the home page. And then that menu's in the top left. So if you can't find what you're looking for on that home page, we got a menu with all kinds of cool tidbits of information that are really useful, as well as really good products. We'll talk about them here. So I tossed this slide in. This is just what we've measured in the last 24 hours. So you can see that precipitation was mainly central and eastern Kansas. The background data we pull from the National Weather Service. They have a gridded data set that we use. And then the dots on the map are our stations. You notice they don't necessarily line up. A good example is just south of Hutchinson or Clay Center, where there's zeros and there was precipitation. Well, we cannot measure snow well. We have basically a tipping bucket rain gauges. The snow sets on top of it. It won't go in it to measure. It basically has to melt first. So that's why we're starting to pick up some readings now as the sun's out. It's a beautiful day in eastern Kansas, beautiful winter day. And so as that snow melts, it's going to trickle in and get measured. Basically tip a little tipper we have in there. So we will measure the snow, especially where we didn't have a lot of wind. And it just takes some time. And typically we underestimate snow because you lose some either by wind or by evaporation, or, it's not evaporation. I can't think of I'll remember at the end. But basically lose, so it's an underrepresentation. That's been the biggest problem in the Mesonet. We're hoping to change that in the future with migrating towards weighing rain gauges, but it's going to be a big endeavor for us. So when you go to that main page, you hit that menu in the top left. This is a tool that people really don't know it exists. You hit the weather button there where the little white hand is, and then you go to, I didn't put another white hand, but you go to wind gust and high low, and that'll bring up what the winds were yesterday or in the last 24 hours, really. And you can look at them on the map. You can look at, you can change the map to the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature in the last 24 hours. And you can see how they compare to normal. On the left there, I did this, I believe, on Friday, and it was 59 degrees at Mitchell, which is 9 degrees above the normal. So, and then if you want to look at a comparison long-term, you can hit the charts down there in the bottom and on the bottom left of your screen, and it'll actually display the last year's worth of data, the high temperatures, the low temperatures, and overlay them on the climatology. So you can pull up like July 10th and say, hey, what was the temperature max min? How does that compare to normal? Or maybe we broke a record one day. And you can also look at the wind speeds for the last year if you were to scroll down farther. So it's a really simple tool that's at your fingertips. It's got a ton of data without having to look hard. If you can't find what you're looking for there, if you go to the menu, weather, and then historical weather, you can download all kinds of information. If you just know that if you look at it on a mobile device, it shrinks down some of that just because it can't fit all on the screen. You select your station of interest like you can on any page. You select your data start point, end point, select daily or hourly, and the daily will have evapotranspiration data. It's calculated from the observations we have, and then everything else is similar with temperature, humidity, precip, wind speed. A really cool tool that we started here in the last couple of years is an inversion tool. This is a result of the big dicamba requirements for you can't spray the herbicide in an inversion, and a lot of folks, actually no one had accurate real-time inversion data, and so that's why we added a second temperature sensor up at 30 feet. So now we have 6 foot and 30 foot. We can calculate the difference, and we could tell if there's an inversion or not. If there's a negative difference, a positive. So basically, your lower temperature is cooler than your 30-foot temperature. There's an inversion in place. So like Cheyenne selected there, 7 degrees. It's red. Red's bad. Green's good. What it means there's a 7-degree inversion there, where the 2 meter temperature is 18 degrees. But the 10-meter temperature, 30 feet up, was 25 degrees. So basically, if you were to spray at that point anything, or even like drive down a gravel road, it's likely that the dust is going to just settle there and it's not going to move much laterally, or it's also not going to mix out like you would see in the middle of the day. Typically, we have inversions at night, and then during the day, it's completely unstable, where we have a lot of positives, a lot of green, where that air is mixing vertically and horizontally. So when you spray, the chemicals disperse very well and effectively. You don't have target drifts. You can find this tool under the agriculture where the little white hand is there, and then inversion. And we'll go over a couple more tools that are under that tab. Here's a soil temperature. So we measure soil temperature real time, and then we do 7-day averages as well as the maximum minimum, so you know what the fluctuation's been. This is before the really warm day on Saturday, but we can see at Joule we had a fluctuation between 28 and 53 at the 2-inch soil temperature. Big difference. Also a sign that the soils are really dry because they're fluctuating. Whereas if you got some moisture in them, they wouldn't fluctuate as much. And you can also look at the chart and graph those out. So as we get towards planting season, you usually see those warmer temperatures in the south creeping up northward. And a great way to visually look at that is pull up the soil temperature page. Another tool that's similar to soil temperature is soil moisture. We have that data at 4 depths, 5 centimeter, 10 centimeter, 20, and 50. So that gives you a really good vertical profile. And when we have heavy rain or moisture, you can measure how far down into the soil it gets, as well as it typically dries out from the top down too. So you can look at those changes with time. You can compare the data over the last year or the 7 days. There's maps there for a 7-day change, and we measure it in percent of saturation. Volumetric water content for those that are more into the science of this. But this display is percent of saturation. So our maximum saturation is 100% over the last year, what that mark is. So we know that right now, Joule's at 23%. That's really low, right? 100 is maximum, 0 is none. And basically anything underneath 40 or even 50 is considered dry soil. So really dry soils across central Kansas and the southwest and even the northwest. That pocket in the west is due to that anomalous snowfall event. In the east, they're a little better off, but still, before this recent moisture, we had those warmer temperatures. They lost about 10 to 15% saturation a day there for a while. And they were drying off really quickly. So really diverse. It's not uniform across the state, and it changes, and it's impacted locally, right? A weather station is in one location where the soil type can change drastically away from that point. Still under the agriculture tab, animal comfort is one, especially on a day like today, and the cold cold couple of days coming in the future at the end of the week. Folks that are calving have a big concern with animal comfort and cattle comfort. So we put all that information together with solar radiation, wind, and we provide the current cattle comfort index. And we calculate it on an hourly basis, and you can go back and look at the chart down there below. You might miss the peak time because this is the current value on the map. But if you go to that chart down below, you can look at the 7 days, the last 7 days, to see how high or how low it got and potentially how many hours they were under a certain stress level. So a really cool tool that hopefully displays information that's useful for a lot of folks. We don't have a real good way of going back, but if we do help out the livestock indemnity program, and if there's a claim, we go back, get that data, and send it to them. So, and there's no forecast data either. So like this end of this week looks really cold, and we don't have that available yet. We're just not to that point. If we go to the menu and go to precipitation, this is probably the best tool by far. You go to precipitation, and then I'm going to show precip daily totals here, and on the left side, you can select the station. I have Butler selected here, and you can look at the data on the left side there of precipitation yesterday to the last 7 days, 14 days. To last year even, and what it compares to normal. We don't have normals at all these stations, so we usually take the nearest National Weather Service cooperative site, and we compare it to the Mesonet data. So it gives you a historical reference. And I'll show this map again here in a bit with a different time period, but it's really informative because it tells you how dry you've been over the last year. Then you can also look at it and see, hey, what are your normals? Probably my favorite part of that is the 7-day normals. Is what is our weekly average precipitation? So we don't get any precipitation this week. How big do we build that deficit? Really easy to look at. You can select through all the maps of the different time frames. You can even scroll down and look at when did it rain last, as well as the amount. And when did it rain last is another tool that's found under the precipitation part of the menu. It's called consecutive days without precip. This is, once again, updated last Friday. But we can look at how long it's been since we had 1/10 of an inch or an inch. Note that if there was snowfall that might have equated to 1/10 of an inch, we might not have captured it very well. So this product isn't the most useful during the winter, just because it doesn't accurately assess it. But in the summertime, when we start looking at drying trends and how long we've been dry, this is a great tool to really depict where the drought is growing. Still, you might have missed some precipitation, but before this weekend's event, central Kansas into southwest Kansas was a giant bullseye of a long period without a wetting rain. So lastly, what products do you use of that Mesonet, or what products would you like to see would really help us with our operation? And so drop a message in there. You can add a short response, a couple words, and it'll build a word cloud. I'll give you a couple minutes to reply. I will say we're actively developing a lot of new things. Unfortunately, like everything at the university, we're limited with staffing, and so only so much can be done. But we've really working hard to migrate to new products. One of those was like a wheat growing degree day product that went live last year, and I'll show it here in a little bit. Hey, cool, some answers. Yep, soil. I like that. We've got all the soil information. We're hopefully starting to we're going to hopefully develop a better ability to look back at soil moisture and history, so we can compare our current soil moisture conditions to historical events to say, okay, so it's been dry, but how does this compare to historical events? And are we at a new level of dryness that we haven't seen in the last decade? And that'll help us make better drought decisions as well. I see ET kind of snuck in there, evapotranspiration. That's another thing that is low-hanging fruit for us that we're working on, is a little bit more interactive evapotranspiration page where people can pull that information. But temperature, soil and temperature. So our most common product is the soil temperature page. It seems like everyone loves that, not even just planting season. So hey, thanks for your answers. I appreciate it. So what's going to happen with Mesonet in the future is just we're going to add hopefully winter precipitation capabilities. It's going to be a big overhaul, the chemicals involved, but I think it'll be a big step for us. It'll take a while to deploy them, but we will get there. We're always enhancing quality control. The graph, or not the graph, but the GIF there is a webcam. We started putting webcams out at some of our stations. We're up to about 8 now. And we are getting a lot of really useful information, especially during the growing season. We can check out crop stages, and it might be a way of verifying some of the crop modelings we have, as well as looking at land use around our weather stations. Because sometimes somebody might pull up and there are a few stations where there's a notorious landowner that likes to park heavy equipment or something next to our weather station. And that influences the measurements around it when we have a big combine sitting next to it for a week. So we need to know when those things are. And then it's also cool because you can look at the weather. And then, like I mentioned, the historical soil data, and we're working on, hopefully in the next week, we'll be releasing a hollow stem advisor for grazing on wheat. So that's all I have for the Mesonet. And now we'll move into the probably not so good part of the presentation, where we look at the upcoming weather and climate outlook. This is winter going into spring, a lot of anticipation, a lot of stress, I think related to weather conditions this year. And I hope that we can improve on it. And this weekend was at least a step in the right direction where some folks further west finally got in on some of that moisture. I know it didn't get all the way to the west, but we keep creeping that westward. So hopefully learn something here and we can give you a good guidance tool for going forward in the future. So, what is your biggest concern this spring? Obviously, drought's on everyone's mind because it's front page, but I'll tell you what, if we're going to have drought any time of year, you want drought in the winter because we average the least amount of precipitation and we have the least ag concerns, right? I mean, yeah, we have weed in the ground, but I haven't heard anybody with cattle complain about the dry conditions for calving this spring, which is awesome, right? Gotta think positive. But as we move into the spring too, climatology is our friend. And climatology in the spring is, guess what? Our wettest, or at least entering our wettest period of the year. So moisture can help. And as you learn, one of the things we ended up with last year is we had drought periodically throughout the year across the state. And we had rain events about once a week to once every other week, in most places, not all. And we ended up with a pretty good grass crop, especially in like the northeast part of the state, as well as portions of the west. And so that actually created an increased fire concern. And one of the reasons we had increased fire behavior over the weekend is we hit that bullseye, the northern Flint Hills, where they had really timely rains. So rain is hopefully going to come our way, but we'll see. All right, drought. I kind of figured that would be the case. So let's look at some of the numbers. February felt warm. I talked to several people now, and everyone's like, man, it was. I think it was warmer than normal. Well, actually, statewide, it was cooler than normal by a lot, like over 2.5 degrees monthly departure to date, temperature-wise in February. This is because of we did have a cold snap there towards the end of the month, and a brief cold couple of days there in the beginning of the month. But our overnight low temperatures were 2 to 3 degrees colder than normal for the month of February because we had really dry conditions across the state. When we have really dry conditions, our air warms up and cools off quicker and more, and there's bigger temperature swings. And so when we're swinging this time of year, we're getting our least amount of solar radiation, really, I guess we're equivalent to December, but it's one of our least months of solar radiation. So our temperatures are able to fall more at night when we cool off because the ground's dry and the air above it's dry. And so we had, on average, cooler than normal temperatures this day. If we were to take that time frame, though, and move it back to August and January, we had just incredible warmth. We were record warmest. If we took the temperatures just from August to January and average them, it was our record warmest August through January period. That's an impressive feat. December was the warmest December on record. So when we look at temperatures, I think the damage of the drought that we're at right now got done due to December. I mean, just December, it was just so warm. And when we're that warm this time of year, we just suck all the moisture out of the ground. So in that period, and this is before the weekend, so as of March 3rd, even the areas that did get moisture in the southeast were still 4 to 5 inches below average, which they average a lot more precipitation, but that's a big chunk. And so really the whole state, except for that one little band there in the far west, and then that one little band in the northeast where they got lucky in August, 120-day departure, which took this back to about the beginning of November or the end of October, was just incredibly dry. And if you're to overlay like a normals map on here, those contours of the coloration is basically where the normals are. I mean, just little to no moisture. And we already talked about that, Matt. And so our soil temperatures, or soil moisture, it was pretty low. And it even makes the 70s and 80s in the eastern part of the state. Really, they kind of overdoes what our current state of the soils is. If we go down deeper, though, right, because we're concerned about planting and whatnot, but we can't just look at the very top. We have to look down below. There's still moisture down there. Thankfully, this time of year, like I said, is probably the best time to have drought because we don't have any actively growing vegetation. We're not extracting that moisture out and dispersing it through evapotranspiration. So we still have some storage. There are a few exceptions, especially where we had the sandy soils, like a couple 30% down there in the south, and even like Jewel had low soil moisture at 20 centimeters. But for the most part, most folks sitting around that 70 to 80 range, a little bit lower in places. But we can't just look at that. We have seen just an incredible growth of drought over the last 12 weeks, where we've gone from no drought in central Kansas to severe drought. And that's a 3-class degradation focus there in central Kansas. It just, when you're that warm, it just does not bode well, especially for like surface water too, because we evaporate a lot more. And so currently, as we stay on the drought monitor, a severe drought for most of central and western Kansas, and abnormally dry for eastern Kansas. If I were to guess, probably some small improvements in the east with this recent precipitation, but likely continued degradation in the west, where they just have not gotten enough moisture to offset it. So still looking at probably growing drought. If we look at, this is one of the products I was going to show earlier and decided to move it here, is a wheat growing degree stage page. So it basically accumulates the heat. I don't remember what the thresholds are, but the important part to note is that there's no color on the map yet. Everyone's still below that first stage, which is they're in the ceiling and they're not to the tillering stage yet. And we're actually running well above average. That black line right there is where we currently sit. This blue line is average. So we're well above average. In fact, 2017 is the closest to where we're at right now. And that was obviously an impressive year. We had quite a bit of a drought develop in the mid-spring timeframe, and we were really warm. And so we're tracking along with that. You can compare the previous years. You can turn those years on and off on this webpage. And then precipitation wise, this period is in the little orange square there, was the fourth driest November to February on record. And this includes all of February. Only 1.36 inches average across the whole state. That's really dry. Our record driest was 76 to 77, and our average it's 4 inches. We weren't even close to average. If we were to compare years, the third driest was 2017, which is when we were tracking similarly with growing degree days. Makes sense, right? We kind of trend a little bit warmer with degree days if we have less precipitation, because we can warm up a little bit more in the daytime. So just this is the precipitation anomaly for each for across the US, basically your percent of average. And just a couple of notable locations I picked out of where they're in the top 3 to top 5 driest on November to February. And Belleville, Lebanon, Clay Center were all the driest on record. You get further south, it was a little bit more improved. Get a fourth in Ashland and a fifth driest in Great Bend, but just incredibly dry for the central part of the state. Once again, this is before this weekend, but we can see a pretty big snow hole. This is snow accumulated throughout the season. So basically the end of September through the beginning of March. And north central Kansas was in a giant snow hole. We had those 2 corridors of heavy snow in the east and the west, pretty localized, not widespread. Typically, we get about 2.5 feet to 3 feet in the northwest and as little as 10 inches in the southeast. So southeast is actually running a little bit hotter, or not hotter, a little bit higher than normal. But that big snow hole in north central is really correlated with where some of our driest concerns and our biggest drought concerns are going into the spring. So, how much snow have you received? I know a lot of folks in north central haven't had some snow, but they had it earlier in the season. And I think that helped a little bit kind of take the edge off, because if we didn't have that snow, we were going to be up a creek. But those two corridors in east to west really, really got lucky. And I'd say we got, at least I'm in Manhattan, and this 3 inches of snow that we got over the weekend was our biggest snow event of the year. And that's saying a lot. So not quite as many folks, less than an inch or 1 to 2 inches as I thought there would be. And that tells a lot of where you guys are coming from, right? Because your location is going to be key. I'll give it another second here. Any last votes? 3, 2, 1. Okay. So when we look at just the agronomy demand at this point, Northeast seems to be doing the best. They actually have green wheat in the Northeast, but some interesting problems with the dry conditions. Obviously, poor wheat stands in central Kansas, and some of the producers are thinking their wheat's completely killed in the Southwest. And a lot of that was due not just to the dry conditions, but the December 15th event kind of just destroyed the crop, really. Nothing left but stems, and the leaves are completely eroded off. And then even in the far southeast, they have had moisture, but they were so cold or so dry to start the fall or to start the winter that they were the colder temperatures, the crops really didn't do well. And they got really impacted by the cold temperatures. So, there's a concern now as you get into spring and we have dry soils. I think with the wheat, especially the dry soil, they've already been under cold temperatures for the western part of the state, but the wheat is progressing the most in the southeast. And this moisture that we just got this weekend in the southeast probably really helped, not really insulate, but at least help improve those soil moisture content. So it's not as likely to have a hard freeze and damage the crop. So our storm tracks this year really helped drive the pattern. That higher moisture content or higher anomaly in the middle or the Ohio valleys really helped. Guess what? If we were to overlay this, especially that blue line, classic La Nina. I mean, absolutely classic La Nina. Southwest flow off the Gulf into the Ohio Valley. And we've been in basically a La Nina condition to a moderate La Nina. That negative 0.5 is the La Nina threshold. And as we get lower, we get into a moderate to a strong La Nina. And then that El Nino is anything from 0.5 or higher. Well, we are currently sitting in an El Nino to a slightly moderate, or not, a La Nina to a slightly moderate La Nina. And our projection is to go neutral, basically go towards zero, neutral conditions. So La Nina is expected not to have as much of an influence. Typically, when that happens, that blue line, which is your jet stream, starts to shift westward. And basically that active pattern will transition further west into the central part of the state. That, last I checked, a good southwest flow that brought the Ohio Valley moisture. We get southwest flow here. We don't have the Gulf of Mexico to our southwest. It's south of us. Guess what's southwest of us? Mountains and drought. We've got really dry conditions across parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. And that basically is not a good direction for us to get moisture in the spring. We saw that really come to fruition with kind of the first system of this pattern breakdown on Saturday. You had a really strong southwest flow that it was really dry, pushed that dry line all the way to eastern Kansas and kept most of storm activity to the east of us. That is likely to be a common theme where the moisture already went to the south and east of us, and now it's going to continue. But there is hope. There is, I added this slide, but this is the precipitation forecast for this week. 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of moisture, mainly along and north of I-70. That'd be snow. That'd be a bit humdinger of an event for us because that would be exactly where we need it in northern Kansas. Obviously, I like to have it, in southwest Kansas as well. But we'll see if that comes to fruition. I will say that systems like this coming week tend to be a little bit more moisture starved as we get closer. So we'll see if that trend happens. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the pattern is not shifting in our favor, but we still might get some hope before that pattern shift really kicks into gear. So our temperature forecast for basically the March 9th and 13th timeframe is below average temperatures. That's mainly focused on Thursday and Friday of this week. really, really cold temperatures for this time of year. We're talking like 30 to 40 degrees below average. But it's a short duration. The average precipitation for that period is still relatively low in that, and it's a little underdone on the 6 to 10 day precipitation. That precipitation verifies in the Nebraska border, that'll be above normal. If we go out further to the 17th, cooler temperatures still kind of hanging around. This still captures Thursday and Friday on the back end of it. So I think it's being influenced by it. We go out even further to 3 to 4 weeks. We're seeing a trend. That pattern shifted, and we're going to warm back up quickly this weekend. And unfortunately, we're going to dry back out really quickly starting this weekend. This pattern, if we'd extend it out even further to March, April, and May, the CPC all buy into it and say that we're going to stay consistently above average temperature-wise. And especially for the western half of the state, confidence is pretty good of below average. The model agreement tends to buy into that. Here's April, May, and June into the early summer. Above normal temperatures, below normal precip on the right. It's not a good setup. So overall, to summarize everything, forecast is not favorable for precipitation for this spring for much of the state, especially central to western Kansas. The pattern is not favorable. I expect drought to continue until we see a sign of above normal precipitation and a trend towards that. We are not likely to overcome drought before spring. So we'll still likely see deficits and impacts of long-term drought persist into the summer. One thing I didn't mention is the severe weather. Like we saw on Saturday, we're still going to get potent storm systems move across the state. There will be strong dry lines associated with them, especially with as much drought as we had to our south and west. What that means is an optimal forecast for heightened severe weather, especially in the eastern part of the state. They won't get the rain because the storms won't congeal and basically become a mess of storms until they get to the Missouri border. But we'll have isolated storms, which are typically have a much higher potential for severe weather, tornadoes, hail, and wind. And with the weakening La Nina, we tend to see hot spots. We saw last year a little bit more than we've seen the last few years, hot spots or severe weather in the east. And then obviously our wildfire concerns. We saw it, this tip of the iceberg, I think, Saturday. After this coming weekend into April, we are going to have a pattern that's going to be really conducive for many more large fire days. So be thinking about that and what you can do to be prepared should there be more fires. So what's your forecast? Go ahead and you can drop a short little blurb of hot, dry, or I'm making things up. I don't know, you voice your opinion here, but a lot of folks, you could go back and look at how many fog days we had, and that'll equate to precipitation. Well, I think this fall fog days have not come to fruition. I think we would all agree on that. But yeah, hot and dry. It's not a good dray. That's a new one. I haven't heard of dray. But yeah, we're dry. It's really hard to overcome that dryness when we go into summer. And so we got to think about that with planting, right? We need some topsoil moisture when we plant, and I just think it's going to be hard to come by. So that is all I've got for you guys. I appreciate you being an attentive audience, answering those questions. I'm glad they worked out. And if you want to reach me, there's my email. I'm on Twitter at WXChip, and obviously the website. I mean, hit the website up and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or input. Thank you much.
Hey, Chip. We did have one question come in so far in the Q&A, and I'm just going to read it here and you can respond. Why does the corning station go offline when it gets well below zero? I guess this started after we had that extremely high winds and rain several months back that put the station offline for several days.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure that out. Typically when it gets cold, that station tends to start falling off. It's a communications thing. We're not losing any data. So we're looking into it. We're going to switch out the cellular modem, and hopefully that'll fix it. it might be something as simple as maybe the antenna is not quite screwed in as well. And when it gets cold, it contracts enough that we lose connection. We don't lose data. So it's all there. Good question.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I know that I didn't have any questions on YouTube either. So, Chip, can you give us maybe, I have a quick question. Is there any new weather stations that are coming up that are going to be coming in here in 22, 23?
New weather stations. Yeah, we have a proposal in for a weather station in Rooks in Russell County.
Oh.
But it hasn't been funded yet. And the last time we applied for it, it got turned down due to some reasons out of our hands. So hopefully that comes to fruition. We also have a grant in for Barton and Rice counties as well. So once again, same thing. Don't know if we'll get it or not.
Okay. And is it still about, I don't know, $15,000, $18,000 to get a weather station in a county? Is that kind of in the ballpark?
That's if we can get the parts right now.
Oh.
Yeah. We're lucky to have a pretty good stockpile, but I'll tell you, getting equipment's been pretty challenging for us. But yeah, that it's roughly about $20,000 a station. We actively are looking and pursuing maintenance funds to help longevity for each station too.
Okay.
A lot of work in the background of maintenance. Like that Corning station, we have stations on every corner of the state. It's a lot of work to maintain them. And like a blowing wind event like we had December 15th, we're still fixing stuff of broken anemometers and cleaning out temperature sensors. And it's a lot of work.
So if we had a producer out there that's willing to donate that, you'd gladly take their money and name it their weather station, right?
Yeah, we do. We put our sponsors on the metadata page so you can see who sponsors which station. So they get some recognition.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions, so I'll turn it over to you, Craig.
All righty. Thank you, Chip, for all the great information you provided. Oop, there we go. For those that are needing CCA credits, hopefully you caught that at the beginning. You can email Jeannie Falk Jones or put it there in the chat box and we'll try to get you recorded, or there's a QR code to sign in and sign out with your name and CCA number. Like I said, you can email jfalkjones@kstate.edu with that information. And then also we would like to have a little evaluation filled out by everybody. This just kind of helps us, evaluate this program and then also get any ideas for any future programming. There should be a link pop up in the chat for you to click on and fill that out, or you could use your phone and use a QR code to access that evaluation. And then we are having a bonus one session that we added, with the way crop markets have gone and all that, everything that's going on in the world. We added a crop market outlook and strategies, same time next week, noon to 1, Monday, March 14th. Speaking will be Dan O'Brien, Northwest area ag economist. So look forward to hearing what Dan has to say and look forward to hopefully seeing you all next week.
I also might mention if they have missed any of these crop talk sessions, Craig, they can go to the Northwest Agronomy website, and all those recordings and handouts are listed too. Plus, several of the counties or districts maybe have those posted on their websites as well. So either check your own website for your county or district, or go to Northwest, and you should be able to get the handouts and the recordings, not only for these sessions, But for our weed schools that we've had and our fertilizer schools that we've had too, those are also posted.